Welcome back to the Roadmap to Retirement podcast.
This is Roadmap to Retirement. Tune in for financial tips, investment strategies, and smart money moves to supercharge your retirement savings. Alex Neri, CFP, and guests are here to help you build your roadmap to retirement.
When I first came across you, it must have been the Kids' podcast you did in 2017. I looked back to see when
that was the first one, yeah.
I heard that, listened to you. I came across your book and I listened to the audio version, which if I remember correctly, was that you reading it? Did you do the?
Yeah. Oh, in 2021, yeah.
Okay, so I probably listened to that in 21. And I think the first thing that stood out to me when I listened to the Kids' podcast was just the whole work-life balance that you had struck. And I think you talked about like 80 something days off that year. Yeah. And I had never really heard another advisor talk that way. I came from the old school mentality, or like the mentors that I had were very much like in the office from 8 to 6 every day, 10 hours a week, doing like call nights and things like that. And then I listened to your podcast. I'm like, oh, this guy's got it figured out. He's traveling, he's having fun, he's spending time with his family, doing it the right way. So that was pretty cool. And then I followed you, I think, on social media after that. And then you had a book come out. So then I read your book. Nice. And I think since your book came out, I started doing surge meetings. So if you want to kick us off, tell me about surge meetings and how you came to decide what that is. Maybe tell our audience what it is first.
Yeah. Anytime you have a task that you're going to do on a regular basis. So for us as advisors, Alex, that would be meeting with clients, right? Now, clients have things that come up whenever they come up. You get a new job offer, you decide to retire, like those need to happen when they need to happen. But most things, we can meet in the spring around tax season, we can meet in the fall before the holidays. And if we're going to do those meetings, let's go ahead and do a lot of them all at once instead of spreading them out 2 or 3 at a time, per day or per week. The same, by the way, for all professionals, accountants, attorneys, doctors. If you're going to do client meetings, do a lot of them at once instead of just spreading them out. It makes you better at doing it. Your team gets in line with it, and then it allows you to have focus time. So really what I wanted to have was weeks where I met with clients, and then weeks where I could work strategically on my practice, on clients, where I could really focus on these other things, take vacation with my family, and not worry about, hey, I have a meeting in the middle of the day on Thursday. It's going to throw off my role.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I know a lot of your motivation is coming from opening up your schedule to do other things and travel, which I definitely also enjoy. One of the things that I do like about the surge meetings is that I align it around tax season, like you mentioned. So I have a spring and a fall review meeting. Yep. I love getting in front of the clients in the spring when they're thinking about their taxes, even if we're not actually implementing any strategy there. It just means that they're thinking in terms of finance for the first time, probably since last year. And then the fall is a meeting about tax loss harvesting, Roth conversions, all those things that have that December 31st deadline. So we found that to be really helpful. But the other thing that kind of comes into play a little bit that I wasn't thinking about when I started it is knowing that I'm doing those structured surge meetings means that I know that every single one of my clients is offered a review meeting twice a year.
Yep.
I know when it is off the top of my head without having to look it up somewhere. And the reality in our business is we do have some clients that just don't respond to emails, don't answer the phone, never call you back, never schedule the meeting. And we're still charging that fee. And this allows me to at least have that to fall back on if I need to.
Yeah, and for those clients that are typically just more hands-off, right? They're more of delegators. Like, hey, Alex, you've got this thing. I don't need to come in every 6 months. I still have a meeting for them, even if it's just me, and I'll send them an email or a quick Loom video saying, hey, Alex, here's the things that we were going to talk about. And of course, Alex, I know it's the same in your practice, but if there was a pressing issue, that becomes a non-negotiable. Hey, we noticed that your beneficiaries aren't right, or we noticed that something's wrong on your tax return. We need to get together and review that. Otherwise, yeah, if you're feeling good with the work we're doing, no worries, we can wait 6 months.
Sure. That makes a ton of sense. One of the hard things about it too is, let's say I have October review meetings, they get the invite sent out, they choose not to use the Calendly link. My assistant calls, follows up, tries to schedule a meeting. They never get back to us. And all of a sudden, that was the October review meeting. January comes around and now they have urgency and they say, hey, I sorry to get back to you before, but now I want to meet. I'm really bad about turning them away. Like, to me, it's, oh yeah, no problem. Come on in whenever. I think the right way to do this, I think you've talked about this, is to explain to them, no, we did a review meeting in October. You weren't able to do that, but good news, you have another one coming up in April. Do you mind waiting until then? How do you handle that?
Alex, this opens a big discussion on forcing mechanisms. So most of us, basically all of us, live in this super reactive mode. An example of this would be email alerts. And we'll get back to your client example. But most people are getting alerts on their desktop, on their phone, on their watch, every time an email comes in. What, Alex, how many of the emails you receive are of any value? Like 1 in 100, 1 in 1,000? Most of them are junk. Most of them are news alerts. But every time that happens, it pulls you away from whatever you were working on in a productive manner. And so let's use your client example. Client calls your office. Let's use an example. We'll use my office. My best client calls. My office manager calling answers the phone. Let's call the client. Bob says, "Hey, it's Bob, your number one client. I need to talk to Jarvis right now." So one of two scenarios emerges. In most offices, what will happen is Colleen will say, what will she say? "Let me see if Jarvis is available." What is that code for? That's code for, let me see if you're important enough for him to talk to you, because she knows if I'm available or not. So she rings me, "Hey, Bob's on the phone. He's got a question." "What's the question?" "I don't know. I didn't ask him." "Oh, now he's already been on hold. All right, patch him through." So Bob gets patched through while I'm trying to pull him up on my computer, trying to remember what's going on, right? That's the most common scenario, which does not work for me as an advisor. It does not work for the client. The other scenario, Alex, is that Colleen says, "Bob, Jarvis is helping another client right now. He always loves to talk to you. If this is urgent, I can have him call you back today at 3, otherwise tomorrow, or I can add this to your meeting agenda when you guys meet, whenever that is." Bob says, "That's great." He tells Colleen half the time she can take care of it, which is really what Bob wanted. The other half of the time, it's something for me. And then when I call Bob back at the allotted time, I'm now ready to have an intelligent discussion. So even as a consumer, like, part of me wants my professionals to answer the phone when I call, but the logical side of me says, no, what I really want is a smart answer on this thing. I don't want to interrupt them.
Sure. Yeah, a lot of times Bob in that example doesn't know what your staff is capable of handling. They have the idea that only Matthew Jarvis can answer this question.
That's right.
When the reality is that probably a lot of other people in your office can start to answer it, and now they're taken care of. I like to think of it as like a doctor's office, or maybe a dentist office is a better example, where you're meeting with them or you're cleaning their teeth every 6 months, and they get into that schedule. And once they expect it and they're trained on that, they never question. I called my dentist office and the dentist didn't answer the phone and he couldn't answer my question. You just have to give your clients the expectation that's how a professional office operates.
Yeah. And for me, once I learned this as a professional, as a consumer, I don't want the top dog to get on the phone with me unless I have a question specific for the top dog, right? If I have a question for my doctor, I don't really want to talk to her. I just need the answer. And so I don't want her to get distracted by me asking for a refill or some nominal question. If her team can take care of it, that's great. I want to save my access to her and my bill for accessing her for when I have something that's worthy of her level of expertise.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. I love that. I love the surge meetings. It's definitely changed my business. So any advisors listening to this, if you haven't tried surge meetings, now is a good time. Try it now.
Fun fact, Alex, what is the origin of surge meetings? This one, where did surge meetings start?
I don't. I would love to hear it though.
Genesis chapter 1, God created the earth in multiple days. Like, he could have taken a gazillion years. Day 1, day for light from darkness. That's always our joke, right? Like, time blocking was the earliest written records, right? The Bible, and this is not a religious discussion, talk about time blocking. That's how the Bible starts, as time blocking, right? The oldest historical text. So time blocking is not new. Henry Ford is known for the assembly line. Hey, do the same task, you'll get better at it. But this isn't a new concept. Like, we're taking what's arguably the oldest known concept in the written language, and we're just applying it in a modern day setting.
Love the history. That's cool.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. The other thing too is, I think from the client perspective, if you say, okay, I review with my client or review with my advisor every 6 months, or even if it's just once a year, and they say, my review month is December. Well, okay, why is it December? Does that make any sense to your financial plan, your financial life at all? And it usually doesn't. So I think if a lot of advisors will break up their clients by review months. So if they have 120 clients, they'll say, I'm going to take 10 clients per month and space it out. Some of your clients are getting ripped off if they have a bad review month. Now they won't know it's a bad review month, and maybe you don't either. But I think even if the only value of the surge meeting was meeting with the clients at the best time for them or the best time for their financial plan, that alone has value. When you couple it with efficient time blocking that helps you run your business better, and it allows you to go spend, what was it, a month in China or whatever it is, I think that's a pretty cool thing to do.
Yeah, there's a lot of, this boils down, Alex, to be intentional, right? So whether you're an advisor or whatever you are, like, why am I doing things the way that I'm doing them? Is it because I accidentally became that way? Is it because the way I always did it? Is that because Bob in my office did it that way? Like, I always, one of my core principles of success is to ask myself, why am I doing it this way? And if I can't come up with why, then let me take a step back and say, who's doing it a different way? Who seems to be doing it better than me? Why are they doing it that way? Now, they might also be doing it accidentally, but I want to just peel back that onion until I can say, oh, this person's doing it really good for a specific reason. And if my rationale matches theirs or my motivations, I'm going to do it that way as well.
Sure. Yeah. That's the worst reason is because we've always done it that way. And if that's the only thing you can come up with, let's have a deeper conversation about it.
Yeah.
I don't want to.
Let's acknowledge that it's hard to be intentional, right? We're doing things a certain way because that was the easiest way to do it, as a path of least resistance. It's why in the evening you find yourself flopped on the couch watching Netflix instead of like, hey, what I should do tonight is go to the gym. It's way easier to sit and watch Netflix than to get up and go to the gym. And that's why most of the country's overweight, right? So we have to acknowledge being intentional is really hard. It takes a lot of discipline and a lot of forcing mechanisms.
Yeah. So wake up on purpose. Don't roll out of bed at 10:30. So I was going to redirect our conversation, ask you more about the book. Just so you know, in the back of your mind, I have started writing a book as well. I'm 2 pages in.
Cool. Okay.
I started about 6 months ago, and the goal was to write 2 pages every day. And if I could do that for 50 days, I have a 100-page book. But I'm still at page 2, so I have not been intentional about that. So tell me about your book. What motivated you to actually write a book? Because I think a ton of advisors have the best of intention. They like have an idea for something like that, and they never follow through.
Yeah. A couple of thoughts. It's any creative endeavor. So we'll talk specifically about my book, but it's a podcast. So it's interesting, Alex, right? So here you're a little hard on yourself that you haven't hit your book goal, but here we're doing a podcast, right? So it could be that the written word is not your best creative outlet. Like it's just an outlet, right? It could be that podcasting is your best creative outlet, or YouTube videos, or whatever the case may be. The best book I've ever read, and I read this book every single year, the best book on creative process is The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield. So not The Art of War by Sun Tzu, but The War of Art. Yeah, The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield is a short read, and he talks about how difficult the creative process is, and he gives a lot of good guidance. But my book, to your question, it was a message to my earlier self, right? So I was about 20 years into my career when I wrote my book. And it was all of the things I wish somebody would have told me 20 years ago. So when I sat down to write, when I had time on my schedule, I felt like I was writing to my younger self. And I remembered how hard it was to start in this industry. And so whenever I felt like not writing, I thought, wait a second, that guy, that earlier version of me needs this book. And so it let me I just wrote and wrote and wrote. It was really easy to do. It still worked to write a book, but that motivation was really powerful to me. So when we were doing this podcast, I'm thinking about some advisor somewhere is listening to this, and he or she is struggling on their platform or their practice, and hearing this message, Alex, that you and I are sharing, that might give them the insight to get to the next level in their practice and help more clients. And so then I can come to this when I see you on my calendar, I'm like, heck yeah, this is my chance to help one more advisor versus like, why am I spending my Monday morning recording a podcast?
Yeah, no, that's awesome. You're talking about talking to the younger version of yourself, and maybe I was that person. So 2022, the book came out. Well, when I heard you on the podcast, it was 2017. So I was 25 years old. So I was very new in my career. So in a lot of ways, what you did paying it forward has helped. And I'm trying to do something similar here where I spend a lot of time talking to younger advisors. I'm sure you do too. Like I get all these connection requests on LinkedIn, people messaging me, and it's anyone from a college student that thinks they might want to be a financial advisor to that person that just started at the insurance broker dealer 6 months ago, and they're trying to figure out what direction they want to go. And I end up having a phone call or a Zoom meeting, and I don't get paid for that. I don't want to get paid for that. But it's cool to see the next generation coming up. And I have no idea when it happened, but I feel like I was that young advisor. And I don't know when I made the switch or crossed the line into being like the experienced mentor. I'm almost 33 years old. So I feel like I'm still the young advisor, but it's a cool journey.
Yeah, it is a weird like mental shift because I still try to tell myself I'm the young advisor. I'm 43, but I've been in the industry 21 years. Then I get into a room like, oh, wait a second. Like I'm the old advisor in this room. Like I'm not 60, but I'm not 20 anymore. It is a weird space to be in.
Yeah, that's fine. So you're 10 years ahead of me. And then there's somebody that's listening to this that's 23 right now who's in the same boat. I used to go to a financial advisor conference every year, and they would do a breakout session where they'd have a breakout for younger advisors. And you'd be in the room, and there were young advisors that were like in their mid 40s. And I was always, who's drawing the line here? Why is that guy here? I was, 20 years younger than him at the time. There's the stats on the average age in our industry. And Matthew, you're still 60s. A younger advisor.
I'm
you're
still
going to be a younger advisor for a while.
Yeah. And no, that's an interesting thing. Like wherever you self-identify in your age or your experience, I always am looking to hang out with advisors that are further along in their career than I am. Not necessarily age-wise, but they've accomplished something that I haven't yet accomplished. It's fun to hang out with advisors that look and sound like me that are at my stage in career, especially when I was earlier in my career. But really, when I go to conference, I look for the oldest, quietest advisor in the room, because that's typically the guy or gal with the most wisdom. And then I go and figure out how I can honor their expertise and pick their brain. That's who I want to talk to when I'm at an event.
Yeah, that's good advice. I guess I'm always talking to older advisors too. In the beginning of your career, it's by default because they're all older than. But I get some of my better ideas from just people that see the business differently. And I think as a millennial, I see the technology, like I see it one way. And then I talk to somebody else that, like I've got some advisor friends that have 14 connections on LinkedIn. And some of my best lessons are from them because they're not seeing the bias that I'm seeing, which is enjoyable for sure.
Yeah, no, for sure it is. For sure it is. And I typically like to seek out the quieter advisors, which might seem ironic. Like here I am on this big platform and I've booked and everything else. But I like to seek out the advisor that doesn't feel they need to like tell everybody their message. That's usually the guy or the gal with the most wisdom. Is they're crushing it. In fact, Alex, one of the best lessons I got was from an advisor. This is how I actually got into Surge and how I started counting my days out of the office. I was at a conference and I was always trying to learn more. And he saw this, like he had seen me a couple of times. And so he pulls me aside and he says, "Hey, Jarvis, I want to show you something." And he opens up his briefcase. He was an older dude. He pulls out an old paper spreadsheet. Alex, you may have never seen a paper spreadsheet. Like they're green and white. They look like an Excel document, but on paper. And he had been tracking for 20 years all these key measurements about his life: the days he worked, the days he took off, his blood pressure, his weight, his net worth. And he shows this to me. He says, "Jarvis, it's an old cliche, but whatever you track will improve. Start tracking these things and it will improve." And so that was when I started tracking days out of the office. And at first it was 1, and then it was 10, and then 40 and 80 and 100 and whatever I got up to. But that made a huge impact. That changed the trajectory of my career because one old guy in the back of the room said, "Hey, let me show you a thing."
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's your goal for days off? What's the most you've done in a year?
The most I've done if you count weekends, like if you do like a Dan Sullivan, a free day, like 200, if you include 200, 220. Yeah. Oh. I stopped counting a few years ago because it wasn't a priority for me anymore. Like I had really aced that, but I would recommend this, by the way. I used to just keep a calendar on the wall and I would mark on the calendar the days I took off so I could count those. But it's important to note, Alex, I want to say that with a caveat, you have to earn the privilege of taking days off. And so as a younger advisor, as an advisor growing your practice, I would also mark pure prospecting days. And so you have to earn days off. I meet advisors, Alex, and say, "Hey, Jarvis, my practice is just like yours. I took 100 days off last year. Your practice is just like mine. So you did $2 million of revenue last year." "No, I just did 200,000. Okay, so our practices are nothing alike. And I'm not trying to be a jerk here, but it's easy to get caught up on the wrong measurement. Like I started counting days off after I had passed $1 million in revenue because I had to hit that level. It was time for a new focus. If you're sub $1 million of revenue, counting days off is not what to count. You need to be counting prospect calls or face-to-face or podcasts produced or pages of your book written. Sorry, I get a little passionate about that one, Alex.
No, I love that. I think that's a good reality check. And I think you get a lot of people, or I talk to a lot of younger advisors who are getting into this business maybe for the wrong reasons. They see that, oh, you can make a lot of money, you can be your own boss, set your own schedule, you can travel, you can do all these things. But there is absolutely a conversation that needs to be had about paying your dues to get to that point. And if you're the new advisor making $100,000 and you're paying $60,000 in expenses, like you probably can't afford to go leave the country for a month at a time or whatever it is.
No, you need to
definitely appreciate that. And I think it's important to have that context when you're having this conversation, that you're not just leaving the office for 200 days at a time. You're running a legitimate business with 7 figures of revenue, and that allows you to do a lot of things.
Yeah. One of my favorite thought leaders right now is a guy named Scott Galloway. He's not in the industry. He wrote the Algebra of Success and the Algebra of Wealth, both very good books. And he talks about that all good things in life come from being wildly uncomfortable. And so that's the same with our practices, right? So if you say, "Hey, I want to help a lot of clients, or I want to, and therefore make a lot of money," I'm going to have to be wildly uncomfortable. Taking days off is probably not your wildly uncomfortable thing. Now, it is for some advisors. The advisor who's been in it for decades and has never taken more than a week off, that is his or her wildly uncomfortable. For a younger advisor, your wildly uncomfortable is picking up the phone. You're wildly uncomfortable is meeting with centers of influence. You're wildly uncomfortable is whatever it is. But if you're not wildly uncomfortable, you're probably not going to make it. Like like you said, it is a really hard industry. Super lucrative if you're willing to hustle and sacrifice. Super lucrative, but it's very difficult. Very difficult.
Now, when you travel and you're out of the office, you're still tied to your phone. It's hard to really walk away. Do you find yourself working a lot when you're not at the office?
No, I don't.
Okay.
When I'm
So out
when
of
I'm at
office
work.
means you're
That's
out.
right. That's right. Sometimes I'm out. Like we a couple years ago floated the length of the Grand Canyon, right? So we were 2 weeks in the canyon. No, there was no cell phone or internet reception. My satellite phone didn't even work because we're so deep in the canyon. Normally, though, I'm still having a check-in every week with my team. So which whether I'm in the office or not, every week we have a check-in time as a team, and I have it individually with certain employees. But then everything waits to that. No one sends me direct messages. No one is allowed to email me. No clients have my email address. No clients have my cell phone number. Maybe twice a year, I'm interrupted on a non-work day.
Oh,
Maybe twice a year. Otherwise, it just needs to wait. Like, what's so important on a Thursday that can't wait till our Tuesday meeting? If you've set expectations correctly, almost nothing.
well, it's always, we're not emergency room doctors. Like we all have a story of a client that called us on like Christmas Eve or on, and this isn't an emergency. Whatever question you have can wait till Monday morning, but it goes back to setting the tone of what is the expectation in your professional relationship.
Yeah, it's about being just a little bit more intentional. Like I'm willing to guess, and Alex, I won't pick on you because you're the host, but we'll say some random advisor. Like I'm willing to guess a random advisor is not taking client phone calls at 2 a.m. They're not taking client phone calls in the shower. They're not taking client phone calls, I hope, in the men's room or the ladies' room. So you're already saying, hey, there's times where I'll take client calls and there's times where I won't. Like you're already saying that. I'm just being a little bit more intentional about it. I'm just saying, hey, listen, I'm gonna be very specific when I'm doing that. So we all already have intentionality. I'm just saying turn it up a notch or 10 notches.
Yeah, 10 notches is good. It's also, I like, even if I were, even in the primary 9 to 5 working hours when I'm in the office, I still like having a scheduled call. One of my pet peeves is a client out of the blue and they want to ask you whatever random questions on your mind. And it makes you in a tough spot where you're like, I don't know. I don't have your account in front of me. I just don't have the information to answer that question. So I would much prefer in any business to have a scheduled 15-minute phone call where I know I'm talking to Matthew at 2:30 today, and he's going to ask me about this, and I can be ready to go with an answer that best serves them. And I'm very forward about telling clients that is the way we like to do things. That doesn't mean you can't call me, but let's try to plan.
Yeah. There's so many pieces behind that, Alex, right? So if I have a scheduled time to call back, that means my team can do the prep work ahead of time. Whereas if I've taken it spur of the moment, I have to do all the work. So it gives me a chance to delegate. I don't have to worry about playing phone tag, which is a frustrating thing for everyone. And this is a key thing that gets overlooked. I have an opportunity to demonstrate my integrity. How so? If I say, hey, Alex, I'm going to call you at 3 p.m., your phone is going to ring at exactly 3 p.m. Now, I'm not going to be like, hey, Alex, did you notice that I called you right at 3 p.m.? But you're going to notice, consciously or subconsciously, you're going to notice, say, hey, Jarvis said he was going to call me at 3, and exactly 3 p.m. my phone rang. Versus, what does everyone else tell you? We'll call sometime between 2 p.m. and 4 p.m. unless we don't care, and then we'll call you 4 weeks from now, and we won't have the answer. So that gives me a chance to demonstrate integrity in small things, which small things are big things.
Yeah, perfect. That's one of the easiest pieces of advice I got early in my career was like, do what you say you're going to do.
Always.
And whether that means show up on time, have the phone call on time. If you say you're going to bring them coffee, and like whatever the thing is, make sure you do it. And people notice that, whether they will consciously ever tell you that, they definitely know that they'll notice that you're someone they can rely on to do what you say you're going to do, which is cool.
There's a second side to that coin, right? So do what you said you're going to do, but also the other side of that coin is say what you're going to do. So if I'm meeting with a client and I say to the client, hey, I'll take care of this thing. When? At what time frame? So like I'm leaving that to chance that we have the same expectation in their minds. But if I say, hey, Alex, call in for my team is going to have that to you by Thursday. And while I'm telling you that, I'm writing it down so you know that it's reliable. So now you can say, oh, yeah, next Thursday is fine. Or you can say, actually, I actually need that later today. I'm meeting with my banker and I need that later today. Cool. Had I not asked, I would have blown that. You would have thought later today. I would have thought next week. I would have forgotten, whatever the case may be. So yeah, do what you said you're going to do, but also say what it is you're going to do.
Yeah, that's good clarity too. I can make so many stories out of this. Maybe we should just move on before we go too far down the do what you say you're going to do rabbit hole. I did want to ask you about your travels too. Not business related at all. You've traveled a lot. I like to travel. I actually spent about 7.5 weeks out of the country last year, which was pretty cool.
Really?
And
Good on you, dude.
I can give you a whole list of places, but what's the best place you've been to?
Best place I've been to, floating the Grand Canyon was life-changing for my whole family because it was 2 weeks without the internet. Like I told my kids, I said, listen, I haven't gone 2 weeks without the internet since it was invented. Like I grew up as the internet was being invented. So that was life-changing. China was incredible to see. We were in China circa like 2016, and it was fun to go somewhere that wasn't the Western world. I don't know that I would go to China now. It's pretty unsavory place these days with, we won't get into politics, but I'm nervous to go back to China. But it was cool to see a whole different way of living.
Nice. It's funny you mentioned the Grand Canyon, because my mindset towards travel is always like leaving the country, going to different places. Sure. That a lot of times I overlook the things that are actually within the U.S. here. So I haven't been to the Grand Canyon. Maybe I should add that to the list.
Visiting the Grand Canyon, and someone's going to take umbrage at this, but if you're just visiting the rim, like, it's worth an afternoon. You're going to go to the visitor center. You're going to look over the edge. You're going to admire the awe of it. If you're going to make a trip, go further north, go up to Page, Arizona, and see the Antelope Canyons at the top of the Grand Canyon. That's really cool. But that's a day trip. It's not, the grandeur of it gets overwhelmed. Zion's National Park, like in Utah, would be way better. Sorry, we're on a whole side travel tangent.
Yeah, no, I've been to Zion. Keep going. What else?
Yeah. But if you ever have the chance to float the Grand Canyon, we did it non-motorized for 2 weeks, and it was incredible. It was incredible. So Alaska is always great to see. Get deep in Alaska. It's an amazing place.
I just read The Comfort Crisis. I don't know if you read that one or not, but
that's a must read.
Caribou hunting in Alaska, and that sounds pretty. Well, me and my buddies, we both read that book, and we're talking. I think he wants to go. I don't know if I'm as interested, but
Alaska is a cool place. It is epic. Taking an Alaska cruise is fun. It's not the same as Alaska.
So I did an Alaska cruise. I did that when I went with my family when I was, I think, 18 years old. Did the Alaska cruise, left out of Seattle, went up the coast, but going to the actual frozen tundra sounds more intense.
Alaska is a big place. So the city of Anchorage, Alaska, is bigger than the state of Rhode Island geographically. And then my buddy Micah, who's in Alaska, his favorite joke when we're in Texas is to ask Texans, what happens to Texas when you cut Alaska in half? Texas becomes the third largest state. So that's how big Alaska is, more than 2 times the size of Texas, which is not a small place.
Wild.
It was just
Did
wild.
not know that.
Yeah,
a good geography lesson here too.
Fun facts, man. I'm full of them.
Any upcoming trips you're looking forward to?
We're heading to Greece this summer with the family. We're trying to do a little bit slower key trip. We're actually going to do a Mediterranean cruise, which I'm not a cruiser at all because I'm a go kind of person, but trying to find a trip that balances family adventures. So
nice. We did. Greece was one of our stops this summer. We went to Paros, which is an island.
Yeah.
We definitely recommend it. And actually, Madeline, who works with me and is listening to this right now, went there first and recommended it. So Paros was her recommendation.
Cool. Yeah. Very cool. Yeah. Anymore, I'm mostly, so I've done a little bit of travel. I'd love to do more. I spent a lot of time solving, how do I spend more time with more advisors? Like, how do we spread the message of surge meetings and value adds further? There's so much value that we deliver as advisors to clients, and it's easy to understate that or underestimate it. But there's so much more we can deliver when we're systematic about it. If we're intentional about how we deliver value to clients, the value we can deliver increases exponentially. And then as a result of that, so does your income and your quality of life and your family's multi-generational wealth.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. We need more good people in this business. I think that's one of the reasons why I'm so receptive to talking to younger advisors, helping get started.
Oh, yeah.
There's 350 million Americans. You and I cannot help all of them. So the more good people we have in this business, the better. And we also know there's some bad players in our industry. So let's get more good people in, push the bad guys out maybe. But
yeah, no, what we do is an incredible calling, and it's easy to get the imposter syndrome, and it's easy to discount and think we just sit in the office and pick index funds. But it's so much more than that. Like you're helping families accumulate wealth. You're helping them be financially independent. That money that they're saving is going into the U.S. economy, right? Like this isn't just like some capitalist religious tirade here. This is real good. Like each time you help a client make a good financial decision, you are forever shaping the future of a family. You're shaping the future of our country. This is real good that we're doing. This is real good. So don't discount that. And when it's hard, acknowledge it's really hard. Like if it was easy, one of my key mantras, Alex, is if it was easy, everybody would do it and nobody would get paid, which is why you pay Netflix and not the other way around.
Perfect. Did you think, so you started this business pretty young then. What did you think you were going to be doing before you got into this? Was it something else, or did you always want to be a financial advisor?
That's funny. Out of high school, I worked as a mechanic for several years. And then I started in the industry working with my dad. I didn't have a college degree or anything. So no, I would have never thought I'd become a financial advisor. And then as I was an advisor, I talk about this in my book, my first 5 or 8 years were terrible. But then as things started turning around, I never thought I'd be on podcasts. I never thought I would write a book. I never thought I would be helping shape other people's careers. But it's a classic testament of put your head down and work really hard. And when you stop to look up, you'll be somewhere you could never imagine.
Yeah, that's true. everybody I talked to, nobody thought they'd be doing what they are now. And it's even financial advisors across other industries. Like I know a bunch of insurance brokers and realtors and all these professions where no 18-year-old kid going to college or graduating from high school ever thought that this was a career. Like for myself, I originally went to college to be a physical therapist.
Oh,
I don't
sure,
know
yeah.
why. Other than I was 18, I didn't know anything about anything. And I was like, yeah, that sounds good. I'll go do that. And then I got to anatomy my sophomore year of college and was like, I hate the human body. I don't care about this. I'm out. And I started to look at other things, and one thing led to the next. And now here I am. So it's a fun journey.
It is a fun journey. It's a fun journey. That, by the way, Alex, is one of the best conversation starters. If you're talking to a group of people that you don't know, instead of asking them about the sports or whatever, ask them about a sliding door moment in their life, right? Where their life was going one way and a seemingly small thing happened and it changed the trajectory of their life, right? Whether that was how you went from being in physical therapy school to being a financial advisor, whatever the case may be. But you learn a lot about people from that, and you establish so much relationship capital because no one has ever taken that much interest in their life.
That's a good segue. So we're getting to the end of our time here. I don't want to keep you all day, and our listeners are probably sick of hearing me talk. They'd love to listen to you more. So looking at our industry, this is my magic wand question. If you could wave a magic wand and change one thing about our industry that would either make life better for our clients, life better for other advisors, what would be the thing that you want to change in our business?
Ooh, boy, my first one would be getting rid of self-proclaimed experts. People that give advice to advisors who have not been advisors themselves, I think do an enormous disservice to the industry. That's not necessarily universally true. There's a few exceptions to that, but as a rule, I took so much bad advice from industry experts, and we won't name names because my attorneys told me not to, but people that you would recognize, people you've seen on stage, people who keynote at conferences, and they get up there and they cry on stage about how to be a great advisor or how to prospect, and they've never done it themselves, or they washed out. If you haven't sat face to a prospect, face to face with a client, you don't know what it's like, and you need to stop talking about it. And so for advisors listening, and I'm so passionate about this because I was led astray so many times, seek advice from people who have what it is you want to have, whether that's as a practice, in fitness, in marriage, in parenting, whatever. Only take advice from people that have what it is you want to have. Now, at some point, you'll outpace everyone. At some point, you'll be Tom Brady, and there's no one better than you that you can take advice from, and that's fine. At that point, you can then seek out other people, but initially, only take advice from people that do that. So my magic wand would be to anybody who ever speaks at any industry event has to publish their data. And if their data is not better than my data, I'm not going to go to their session.
Transparency. I love that. Yeah.
Yep.
One of my big similar vein is I think of all these career shop type places that hire young people to come in and be advisors. And typically their hiring manager is somebody that's 3 years older than they are and doesn't have any designations, doesn't have any education, never really built a book of business. And they're hiring somebody and acting as a mentor. So I always tell young advisors, don't worry about the firm. That's going to change. Select a mentor that you can truly learn from that knows what they're doing, and some good litmus tests for that.
It is, and this might seem contrary to just what I just said, but the skill set that it takes to manage and mentor young advisors is different than what it takes to be an advisor. So for example, one of the best guys I know is in that space is a guy, Dustin Corrente. He works, but it doesn't matter where he works. You can look him up if you want to, Dustin Corrente. And he manages about 100, 150 advisors. And he is incredibly good at finding and training young advisors and then helping them develop their careers. And that's a skill set I don't have. I have one Gen 2 advisor. That's it. He's helped hundreds of advisors develop their careers. Now, could we argue that maybe there's a different path or maybe they should be doing this or that? I don't know. But hundreds of advisors are in this industry because of his mentoring. Now, where this is not contrary to my prior statement is that he has skin in the game. Like his success is based on these advisors' success, right? He's not just pontificating on what works. He has a real vested interest in this working.
Good for him. There's some good ones out there, but I've also ran into some bad ones.
But I agree with your sentiment, Alex. I would be more concerned with who I'm going to work with than what name is on the wall, because the name on the wall doesn't matter. If it did, all the clients would be at Merrill Lynch and you and I wouldn't have any clients. Right. It's about finding a framework and people where you can thrive.
Yeah, and then the problem in the modern world is a lot of these people coming out of college that are trying to be financial advisors. They're Googling the firm that's going to hire them, which they should. Yeah. And you're seeing all the negative, and there's a lot of negative out there. So then they get this mental block of, I only want to be a financial advisor if I'm aligned with a company that I feel.
It's tough. Yeah, it's real life. Because I know a lot of advisors. I know thousands of advisors. I'm really fortunate to talk to a lot of advisors. And in every imaginable channel, from the wires to Edward Jones to RAs, I know really good advisors I would recommend my mom work with. And in every single channel, I know really bad advisors that I think should be barred from the industry in every channel. And so it's not the channel, right? You need to find a system that works for you. I know, let's use Edward Jones as an example. I know a lot of really good Edward Jones, and they thrive in an environment where everything is taken care of for them except for meeting with a client. Yeah. I know a lot of RAs that really should just go work for Jones because they get buried down in all of the minutia of running a practice, and they would actually be better off working in a Jones office. Now, it's about finding a platform that works for you and delivering value to clients.
Cool. Love it. Couldn't agree more. Let's wrap it up. So that was a good length. Anything you want to say to our listeners before we do?
I'm going to do a shameless plug. Go ahead and find my book on Amazon, Delivering Massive Value. It was really a guide to my younger self. It's full of action items and scripts. It's what I do in my practice every day. And stay tuned for my next book, Unlocking Massive Value, where we're talking about when advisors should take chips off the table.
All right, perfect. I'll look out for that next book. I didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah, it's in the works.
All right. Thank you, Matthew. This has been the Roadmap to Retirement podcast. I'm your host, Alex Neary. And until next time, thanks for listening.
Thanks.
Content here is for illustrative purposes and general information only. It is not legal, tax, or individualized financial advice, nor is it a recommendation to buy, sell, or hold any specific security or engage in any specific trading strategy. Results will vary. Past performance is no indication of future results or success. Market conditions change continuously. This commentary reflects the personal opinions, viewpoints, and analyses of Alexander Neary. It does not necessarily represent those of RFG Advisory, their clients, or their employees. This commentary should not be regarded as a description of advisory services provided by Alexander Neary or RFG Advisory, or performance returns of any client. The views reflected in the commentary are subject to change at any time without notice. Advisory services offered by investment advisory representatives of RFG Advisory, a registered investment advisor. Alexander Neary and RFG Advisory are unaffiliated entities. Advisory services are only offered to clients or prospective clients where RFG Advisory and its representatives are properly licensed or exempt from licensure. No advisory services may be rendered by RFG Advisory unless a client agreement is in place.